Hey Mallards, it is Tuesday, and it's time for me to just talk at the camera after taking a shower. Seems like a thing to do. It's a thing I have done previously and will probably continue to do in the future. Today, Amanda and Megan did a hand fasting, which is I think druidic in nature, Wiccan ritual that essentially happens a year and a day before you're married, and it is a binding of two people together. And it's really interesting to me because part of the ceremony is this idea that you are bound now for a year and a day, and then you will decide at that time to either renew forever, get married, or go your separate ways, forever linked as friends. And I find that very interesting, that like built into a ceremony like this is this idea that it maybe won't end in you being married. It's sort of like a trial period. And I don't know in history whether it was a hand fasting ceremony that then led to you living together and then you got married in a year and a day, or exactly how that all played out. But I'm not saying it's like a great idea, but it is an interesting idea. I have often heard people say that living together really changes things in a relationship. And so the idea that it would be built in, that in a year and a day, you'd come back and either renew your vows or decide to move on, that kind of idea of an expiration date on a relationship is always something that's interested me. I feel like it has a lot of potential, and also obviously has potential to go wrong. So it could go either way, but that doesn't make it a less fascinating concept, and especially something that is as old as hand fasting is, which is pretty ancient. I feel like the modern, like, church decided version of marriage is just very different from the way unions have worked throughout history, and the evolution of that is not something that I'm super knowledgeable on, but is something that I find very interesting. I have been reading recently for a show that I'm working on a lot about matriarchal societies. And an interesting thing about matriarchal societies is that a lot of them don't have this idea of monogamy, a like marriage or a forever partner, because in a society where everything is passed down through the women, you don't have to stick around as the guy, and also it doesn't matter in the same way. So in a patriarchal society, you need the marriage because things pass through the man. And so the man gets married and stays with the woman to prove that these are his children and this is his lineage. But a woman doesn't have to do that. She gave birth to them. They're obviously her kids, and the rest of it doesn't matter. So when the man becomes less important, monogamy becomes less usual. And I find that really kind of an interesting play in society. And that instead it is about family as a whole, and it's more about happiness than it is about institution, which is just an interesting concept. The differences between, and obviously there are not very many surviving matriarchal societies. I think there's only like 3 or 4 that still exist, although there have been a lot more in history, but the differences are very interesting. Just the way that values change and the way that equality is. So there are matriarchal societies where still the idea is that a woman runs the home and that a man goes out and works, which we consider like a very classic ideal. But the difference being that they are on equal footing in that although the man goes out and hunts and gathers and works and is the ruler there, inside the home, the woman is in charge. She decides how to raise the kids. She decides how to run the house. She takes care of the estate. She runs it, not in absence of her husband, which is what happens in some societies, but like in lieu of. Like the estate is run by her, and it will likely pass to her daughters, who will then be in charge of the estate. And it's just a different idea of equality. Like she owns that land that their house is on, and he is the one who maybe can run for government and hold a position, but the balance of power is shifted a little bit in a way that I find very interesting. So it's not equality in the idea that men and women can do exactly the same jobs and they're treated exactly the same and paid exactly the same. There is just, it's equality without sameness, I guess. It's equality more in terms of balance than it is necessarily equality in terms of things being identical, which is a concept I find interesting and not necessarily bad. There's also, it's similar to the idea, I saw a drawing once that was like of the giving tree, and it showed like the giving tree reaching over just to one side to hand an apple to one kid, and then this kid over here with nothing, and it was like inequality. And then it showed a much taller boy and the tree reaching on either side, but like the taller boy could reach the apple and the shorter boy couldn't. But they said like equality, because technically the tree is reaching down exactly the same amount, which makes what they're giving equal. And then there was one where the short kid had a ladder and the tall kid was there so they could both reach the tree, and that's like balance. And so I think that sometimes people say equality and they mean balance, or they don't think about equality in the same way, because equality is not just what's being put out, but it's how it's being presented. So if there's a law that requires that men and women are paid exactly the same wage, no matter what position, but then you still only offer that position to men, technically you're giving equal pay, but you're not providing equal opportunity. And so it is this idea of complete equality and sameness or balance. And I'm not quite sure on a personal level which I prefer, but I do find the idea of this balanced but not the same very fascinating. And the idea that it is a balance of power. And I feel like the dynamic of a balance of power is perhaps even more equal than two people who are the same. It is a similar way to how the government is run, with checks and balances, and making the three branches sort of report to each other and none of them can single-handedly do anything. And I feel like that's better than giving all three branches of government the exact same powers and abilities. So I don't know. Weigh in. Let me know what you think about the institution of marriage, or about marriage traditions, if there are any that you find interesting, or about matriarchal societies and equality. This has been kind of a rambling vlog that I won't edit, and I'll see you tomorrow.